Hello everybody and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and Six Flags just had their first quarterly earning call of the year, and boy oh boy, they revealed a doozy. They've undergone a comprehensive review to see which properties they should divest and sell under the right circumstances. Wait, haven't we heard this one before? Obviously, with that last quip, I'm referring back to the Cedar Fair acquisition of the Paramount parks back in the day, and the eventual closure of parks like Geauga Lake. But before we dive into some of the key points that were brought up, let's catch you up to speed on everything that's happened with this insane merger over the past couple of years. It was officially announced in November of 2023 that Six Flags and Cedar Fair would be merging. Now, this merged company would be referred to as Six Flags and would take on many of the leadership positions from Cedar Fair, with the chairman of the board being the Six Flags CEO. Something else that was mentioned during that announcement was the fact that the Cedar Fair shares would officially just be over the 50% mark. And speaking more about that leadership role, the CEO of Cedar Fair became the CEO of the merged Six Flags company, and that's Richard Zimmerman. Fast forward about 6 months and their merge was okayed by the government, and as of July 1st, 2024, Cedar Fair and Six Flags successfully merged into one company. Then that pretty much brings us up to speed into 2025, with this joint company having multiple pass options that allow you to travel in between both park chains. And heck, even the Six Flags logo has been Cedar Fairified. Something I mentioned though in that original video I made when the merger was first announced was my worry about mergers in general. Usually when companies merge, especially bigger companies, they end up divesting a lot of things. They'll end up dropping a lot of things. And usually it's in a guise to say that they'll make more money combined. And while yes, it is true they will be saving a lot of money going forward with dropping a lot of rides out of their lineup or potentially parks, with at least in this instance, the park experience dropping a little bit in the near future. Now let's go back in time to later last year when a lot of the parks were closing for the season heading into winter. We got tons and tons of announcements of closing rides throughout the chains. Everything from rides like Scrambler at Six Flags Magic Mountain to Anaconda at King's Dominion to even the King Ka at Six Flags Great Adventure, which, at least at the time of recording this video, is set to implode tomorrow. Literally, even the tallest and second fastest ride on the planet was set to close. And with little to no fanfare from the park specifically, the only reason we knew about it were rumors that were started only a couple weeks before. Now, something I mentioned in those King Ka videos I made a couple months ago was the fact that it did cost a lot to run that ride, and that is the bottom line for this company going forward, especially in the near future. While the end goal they'll keep saying is to improve the experience at all the parks, to do that they need a lot more money, and to do that they're going to try and save as much money as they can, with cutting as many things they don't see as truly profitable. Once they do that math and see it dip into the red just a tiny bit, don't be shocked if it ends up going the wayside. And truly anything, it feels like at this rate, could be on that chopping block, especially seeing the King of Coasters come down. Granted, that ride has always been ridiculously expensive to run, and it was almost 20 years old, but it's just kind of crazy. That was a coaster icon. But I will say, on the flip side of things, they have been putting improvements and changes into a lot of parks as well. Unfortunately, Six Flags Great Adventure ended up losing over 7 rides last season. But on the flip side, Six Flags Magic Mountain has a brand new sign out front, and I-305 got a re-theme and repaint. Oh, and don't forget, Cedar Point got a brand new tilt coaster that should be opening this year after Top Thrill 2 failed to open last year. Obviously, I state all of that in jest, as it is really just unfortunate that we haven't seen the spoils of war quite yet from this merge, at least in an appropriate amount that would make the loss of things like King Ka make more sense. And heck, even Green Lantern, their stand-up coaster at Great Adventure, seriously, I feel so terrible for you Great Adventure fans out there. But at the same time, I can't say that I'm completely shocked, as this is usually how it goes with a lot of big merges with big companies. I will say at the very least it is nice to know that there are going to be quite a few coasters coming in 2026, and one will be at Great Adventure. There's one slated for Magic Mountain, and heck, there's even a Giga Dive coaster that's planned for Six Flags Over Texas. So all I can really say is that hopefully all of the cutting of these rides will end up working out for the better in the long run. Into November, the last time there was a quarterly earnings call, they specifically stated that they would not be looking to close any parks whatsoever. But now, as they've said this morning, and this is a direct quote from Richard Zimmerman, the president and CEO of the company, "We have completed our initial review, having identified properties that are less strategic and critical to our long-term growth objectives, properties that we would consider divesting under the right circumstances. These include some of the smaller non-core parks as well as excess undeveloped land that isn't critical to future expansion plans." End quote. I will say the interesting part of that is at the very end of that statement, as bringing up King's Dominion again, they were looking to sell land in Richmond, Virginia, adjacent to the park in the next 12 to 18 months. But the main thing that I think we're all questioning at this rate is, what is a non-core park? There are 42 separate properties within this company now, so maybe we'll be able to find out what they actually mean through their playbook for long-term success. Their first point is maintaining and increasing guest satisfaction being vital to unlock long-term growth opportunities. Okay, fair enough. Their point number 2 is strategically investing marketable capital back into the business, driving growth and ensuring the long-term sustainability of their business, even in challenging economic times. Okay, fair enough. Their third point, though, is kind of interesting. As a volume-driven business, keeping our parks comfortably crowded drives longer length of stay, higher per caps, and better pricing power. That is an interesting point, because honestly, what does that even mean? And I'm sure they have a metric on their own that will justify what a comfortably crowded park is. But all I can think about is some of those parks that are open year-round, like Six Flags Magic Mountain. If you go on a Tuesday in February, it's deserted, right? Obviously, on the weekends, it will be more comfortably or sometimes uncomfortably crowded. But those weekday operation days usually are deserted. Their fourth point is season pass programs being a financial engine of the business, which makes sense. They'll have a reliable and continuing revenue stream. Number 5 is having unique, high-quality food and beverage, and that being essential to increasing value on the guest experience, which I would agree. That is definitely a big point that they should improve. Their 6th point is safety, park cleanliness, attractive landscaping, and family entertainment are important drivers of guest satisfaction, and I would agree on all fronts, but I do think it's interesting for some of these parks as family entertainment, not necessarily in the wheelhouse of certain properties, but other properties, it is the bread and butter, let's be real. Their 7th point is staffing the parks to operate full and effectively without sacrificing excellent customer service. That would be great, but I do know that this year that is kind of an issue, as do take this with a huge grain of salt, because all I've heard is just rumors from around the internet, but that some parks are seeing issues trying to bring in more and more employees for the beginning of the year. And their 8th and final point is leveraging the power of scalable technologies, which is fundamental to guest experience. That just seems to me like a basic point that doesn't really add anything, at least to us, whereas for them, they have a specific meaning for that they didn't necessarily disclose entirely. Now, all of these points were brought up back on November 6th, which was their last quarterly earnings call before this morning. But using all of those, I thought it would be kind of interesting to go through the entire chain and see which properties I think could be going or staying. So here is a map of all of the properties that Six Flags owns currently and operates. Now, I will admit I am not knowledgeable on every single park's operation status or who owns the land, so I would love to hear your guys' thoughts and your knowledge down in the comments below. For this map we're about to drop into, I'm going to have 3 different options on my key. One is that it's definitely going to stay. This property is guaranteed to stay, and if they got rid of it, they'd be crazy. The second option is that I'm not sure if this is 100% going to be staying in their portfolio. Whether it gets sold off by the land or the park itself gets sold is up for question, at least in my mind. even a tiny bit, I'm talking literally 1 or 2% chance of it happening, I'm going to mark it down under that. Now, obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that the park would close forever, as we've seen that with multiple parks that are back in the chain like Darien Lake or Frontier City. But I do think there is a small chance that this park could be sold off to different investors and different operators. And then, of course, the third and final on the key is we know it's gone. And that only really applies so far to the first park that we're going to talk about, and that is California's Great America. This was announced a couple years ago now, but Cedar Fair did sell off the land underneath the park, and they have at this rate, I believe, a good 6 to 8 years to officially vacate the land, but they do also have the option to do it earlier. So I would say make sure you get to that park as soon as you can, especially before things start to get cut from the park proper and hopefully moved to other parks of the chain. I really hope so. But all I can say is thanks a lot, Santa Clara and the 49ers, which, come on, guys. Stop calling yourself the San Francisco 49ers. Like, bro, that's like calling the Angels the LA Angels. Like, what are you talking about? You're in Anaheim. Sell the team, Artie. I'm being serious. Anyway, personal vendettas aside, since we're already on the West Coast, we might as well start there. Now, I think Six Flags Discovery Kingdom will stay, especially since CGA will be closing. That is fairly close, and hopefully we'll see some of the rides from CGA go up to Six Flags Discovery Kingdom. It'd be especially cool to have Railblazer at that park too, and honestly I just hope Railblazer lives in some way or another. As for Hurricane Harbor Concord, I actually have no idea of what their attendance figures look like, and I've actually never even seen footage of the park, but to be honest, I could see this as a non-core park, and I do think this would be in the maybe category. Now, as we head down south to Magic Mountain, that is an obvious stay. This is one of the flagship parks, and it's near the largest metro population in the United States. And while, don't get me wrong, I know they could fetch a pretty penny for the land underneath the park, this is a park I cannot see them getting rid of, unless they really go off the deep end. Then going down to nearby Knott's Berry Farm, it's in the same boat. It serves a different market altogether to Six Flags Magic Mountain. Knott's Berry Farm is one of those, yes, it is staying parks for sure. As for Hurricane Harbor in Phoenix, which is actually specifically in Glendale, I could see that going the wayside and being put under different management eventually. This is a maybe park for sure. Heading further east, we're going to make our way into Oklahoma. This is Frontier City. I could see this again being one of the parks that ends up getting sold off and run under new management, as it has in the past already. And then heading down into Texas, I think Over Texas will stay, as well as Fiesta Texas, especially as that park has been getting so much done to it. It looks absolutely stunning. I can't wait to go back. Now for the Schlitterbahn parks, I don't know too much, but I will say I have always heard they are some of the most successful water parks in the nation. So I would say those will probably stay. However, the Hurricane Harbor Splashtown in Spring, I don't think that's going to stay. That would definitely be a maybe. Heading up north, I think Worlds of Fun should be okay. And staying in Missouri, though, I will say I don't know if Six Flags St. Louis will be 100% staying. Valley Fair up in Minnesota, I do feel like there is that 1% chance that it does change hands. And the same goes for Hurricane Harbor Rockford, whereas Six Flags Great America, definitely staying. Cedar Point, definitely staying. And Kings Island, absolutely staying. Heading down to Georgia, though, I will say I think Six Flags Over Georgia should be totally fine. However, the Whitewater in Marietta, I'm just not completely convinced that this park would stay within the chain if these categories are not met. Carowinds is an absolute stay, especially with the headquarters being next to that park now. King's Dominion is another one of those parks that is absolutely going to be in their core in the future. Whereas Six Flags America, on the other side of things, in Maryland, I'm not entirely convinced that that park will be operating under the Six Flags banner if these criteria are not met. Dorney Park is honestly a weird one, especially with its close proximity to other parks like Great Adventure that they have in the chain, but I do think this park should stay realistically, as well as Great Adventure obviously is one of the flagships. that park should stay as well. Darien Lake is another one of those parks, just like Frontier City, where I could see that park going the wayside and operating on its own or under different management yet again, whereas Canada's Wonderland obviously would be staying within the chain, and the same goes for the other Canadian park, La Ronde. I'm just realizing that I kind of skipped over Michigan's Adventure. I do think this park has a 100% chance of staying. They haven't put anything into this park in almost 20 years, but it's still operating and has a ridiculously solid consumer base that keeps coming back year after year. And honestly, the same could be said for Great Escape. However, I do think this has more of a likelihood of changing hands than Michigan's Adventure, but I'll say it stays for now, and the same goes for Six Flags New England. I think that's absolutely staying. Now, the last park that I have not mentioned yet is Six Flags Mexico. That to me is absolutely staying. It is a powerhouse of a park, and I wish they were able to do more with it, but unfortunately it seems, especially since the whole Siren's Curse thing happened with that Vekoma Tilt Coaster originally slated for there, that there are a lot of neighbors of the park that are really against the park progressing further. Now, I am very curious to see what you guys think of my thoughts on what parks might not be up to snuff for their criteria going forward. And remember, this does not necessarily mean that every park is going to have a Geauga Lake situation where it gets sold off on the land specifically, and eventually other investors come in and build apartments or a shopping center or something along those lines. Unfortunately, CGA is having that happen to it, but I really doubt that we'll see more than one or two of any of these parks in the chain end up going that way. But it wouldn't shock me if there are certain other companies or investors that would like to operate some of these parks, like we saw with Kentucky Kingdom, which was a Six Flags property at one point, which then changed hands to owner Ed Hart before it got sold off to the Herschend Entertainment Corporation, which they operate parks like Dollywood and Silver Dollar City, and they're putting some major investments into the back portion of that park for this upcoming year. But I wanted to bring this up and talk about it a bit because I do think there are some massive question marks going forward with this merge, and they will still be hanging around for at least another couple years. It is just kind of an unfortunate part of things like this, where the hope that closing all of these rides or parks or selling them in some way will eventually lead to enough saved cash that they are able to really bump up the experience at all of the other parks and all the other rides that they will be operating and owning. But with all that said, I wanted to say thank you all so much for watching, and make sure to go check out the entire Attractions magazine article so you can get some more info on what was directly said within this quarterly earnings call if you're a little bit more interested in some of the things outside of my own personal feelings and thoughts, as I do not speak for the company whatsoever, and all of these theoreticals that I brought up in the last half of the video are my own. But I hope you enjoyed at least a little bit of the musings into that. And if you did and you want more updates on this whole merge situation, make sure to subscribe. I will be coming out with a video every once in a while once they drop some major news. But thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.